What is going on, everybody? Welcome back. Welcome to the reveal of the 25th team in my 2020 NFL Power Rankings with a deep dive into the now Las Vegas Raiders. Before we hop in, a quick reminder, please hit that like button down below. If you want to share this video, help support my channel, that is the easiest way to help out right there. Also, a shout out to those following the series through my podcast, the Fully Inflated Football Podcast. If you guys could rate and review on whatever platform you are listening on, that would be much appreciated. So this is about the point in this series each year where I tend to tick off a lot of fan bases, and I've come to find that there's a reason for that in this 25 to 18 range or so. You start to get a lot of teams whose fans have legitimate playoff expectations for their team. So it makes sense why it could kind of set you off to not see them ranked as such. And I definitely do come in lower on this Raiders team than your household names out there. ESPN's got them at 22, NFL Network at 20. But like I said, this team has playoff expectations. And though I might come down here at 25 with the Raiders, that doesn't mean I don't think that this team could make the playoffs. And there are definitely a lot of good things this team has done over the last offseason that could help them make that jump. And I'm really excited to talk about those things. But also, this is a team that's kind of made a few too many conservative moves for my liking, and in my opinion, that's going to kind of hurt this team's upside, at least for this upcoming season, where they're also going to be playing in a new environment after moving away from Oakland. But anyway, like I said, there's a lot of new faces here, a ton of depth, and a lot of pieces to talk about as far as what all needs to kind of come together here if those playoff expectations are to be met here. So again, I do think this team could be a playoff team, even if I, obviously here at 25, find that maybe a little bit unlikely at the moment. So I do want to hop right into the roster review portion of the video because there is a lot to talk about here. If you're new here, what we do is we go through the roster position by position, talk about how they rank and stack up against the rest of the league. While we do that, you will be looking at my own custom Madden roster. So yes, I realize it is a video game, but these are my own ratings, and more importantly, it's a nice copyright-free graphic that I can use to kind of show you how I perceive each player. So do keep that in mind. Then after that, we're going to take a look at this team's schedule, their Vegas over-under, and my overall win total expectations for this team. So kicking off the roster review here with that quarterback position, as we always do, they're going to come in 23rd here with Derek Carr, Marcus Mariota, and Nathan Peterman. It's not that I hate Derek Carr. He's just so freaking conservative. Every year he's at the bottom of the league in depth of target. He has all of the talent, and he's even accurate going deep. But he just really has never been the same since like 2015 when he was playing like a top 5 quarterback and really looked like he might be one of the future greats. He just hasn't developed since that moment. In fact, he's regressed quite a bit and developed a lot of really concerning tendencies. He's one of these quarterbacks that you guys hear me all the time talking about that natural ability to feel the pocket, sense pressure, know when and how to use his feet to manipulate the pocket and extend plays. And that also includes keeping your eyes downfield and really being a playmaker when the play breaks down, playing outside of the structure of the offense, because no quarterback is ever going to have things perfect all year round, and the best ones make plays off schedule. And Derek Carr, to me, just doesn't do that. He checks down way too much. His pocket presence is iffy at best. He might have those tools to run and throw on the move with a really good arm and good accuracy. The problem is, just like his backup here, ironically, he just doesn't know and have those instincts of when to use it. And that is the core of my problem with Derek Carr. He is, to me, the definition of a system quarterback. You draw everything up, you scheme his first reads open at a relatively high level, and he's going to execute. He's going to make those reads well. He's going to take care of the ball. He's going to place the ball accurately and let the guys around him make plays for him. And that's really what John Gruden has recognized about Derek Carr and done a good job to build around him with some of these playmakers that are really focused on catch and run, short to intermediate passing game, where Derek Carr has kind of shown that he is the most comfortable. Now, maybe, just maybe, at this stage in his career, getting a Henry Ruggs in here will open up that deep threat aspect and kind of get him back to the way he was coming out of Fresno, which is a little more of a gunslinger type, which he's completely fallen away from. as his career has developed here in Oakland. In Oakland. I'm going to screw that up at some point, so I'm just going to apologize in advance for that. But I think you get the point here. Like, my belief is that Derek Carr is a very good quarterback. He is a starting caliber quarterback, and even if eventually this team moves on from him, like I actually suggested maybe they should have considered looking at better options this offseason, and they kind of did that with Marcus Mariota. Even if this team moves on from him, he's got to be a starter somewhere. I just don't see him as a guy that has a ton of upside. Even though he has those physical tools, we've gone long enough without seeing him unlock those that I feel pretty confident that it's just not going to happen at this point. So I have a pretty pessimistic outlook on Derek Carr. He's fine. Like, he's a good enough quarterback that you could win a Super Bowl with if everything goes right. But we're talking about surrounding him with an elite defense and exceptional playmakers all around him, which, spoiler alert, I just don't think this team has right now. So that's the Derek Carr spiel. And then Marcus Mariota, it's almost eerie, right? Like, if you go back to what I said about him in my Titans deep dive last year, it's identical to what I just said about Derek Carr. Not just the whole future outlook thing where, like, yeah, he's fine, like, he should probably be starting somewhere, but he just hasn't really shown that development. But also the actual, like, things about his tape that concerned me, as far as not having those playmaking instincts on, like, a 3rd and 8, knowing when and how to kind of get a little more aggressive, and he just doesn't have that. So he is almost the perfect backup to Derek Carr, and he could kind of do to Carr what Ryan Tannehill did to him. I had even said similar things about Ryan Tannehill the year before that, so it's almost like this big domino effect. I would not be surprised at all if this Raiders team starts 3-5, and they just go to Mariota to figure out, and he kind of kickstarts some things just because he's playing with more of a chip on his shoulder. Maybe he takes more of an effort approach in a way that sort of Ryan Tannehill did for the Titans, where he's like, well, it can't get any worse than where I'm at, so let's just come out here slinging the ball around, and then it kind of turns his career around. That could happen with Marcus Mariota. He's got all the tools, so it's an interesting dynamic. They come in 23rd, though, just because that they might be locked in at 23. I don't think they're going to be much worse than that, but I really don't see a ton of upside unless this man Nathan Peterman reaches his upside and becomes the best quarterback in the NFL. Obviously a joke. I mean, I am a bit of a Nathan Peterman stan. I think he gets a little bit too much hate. He came in and made his debut against a lethal Chargers defense at the time, threw 5 picks in his opener. He's a quality backup, in my opinion. I think he's going to make this team, and I don't think he'll ever be a starter or anything, but I do think he gets a little bit too much hate. I kind of feel bad for Nate Peterman quite a bit. Actually, balled out in the preseason last year. So 23rd at quarterback. Obviously going to be a big reason why I'm a little bit lower on this team is just a lack of belief in the upside of this offense in general due to the quarterbacks, even though the rest of this offense is looking really nice. So let's talk about the running back here. They're going to come in 6th. Josh Jacobs, to me, is just the definition of how good rookie running backs are. Like, these guys come in with fresh legs. In Josh Jacobs' case, he barely touched the ball at Alabama, but it was pretty obvious that this guy was going to be a rock star in the NFL. He does everything at the running back position. It's not a coincidence that he's tied with Joe Mixon here. They're very similar players. They're built almost identical. They have that short area burst, mixing a little bit more long speed, but they catch the ball out of the backfield. They'll run you over, but also consistently make the first man miss. I'm just a big believer in Josh Jacobs. I was very critical of when they drafted him, but we're pretty far removed from that point. He is one of the best running backs in the league. Now, we've now covered almost all of the top 5 or 6 running backs in the league, and we're not even at the 24th team in my power ranking. So it goes to show you what having a great running back means for you, but they do have it, and he really is going to help out Derek Carr in that short to intermediate passing game and complement a lot of these other weapons well. Then you have, I guess, Jalen Richard behind him. He's been the sort of third down scat back here. He's a low-end kind of third down running back type. He's fine. I do like that they brought in Lynn Bowden, or Bowden. I've been told both ways that I'm saying it wrong. But either way, this is a really intriguing player. He played a little quarterback, a little receiver, a little running back at Kentucky. The dude is ridiculously explosive. It's hard not to fall in love with a player like this because it's just kind of gets your imagination going. And I'm very excited to see how John Gruden, who we'll kind of talk about how he ranks as a coach in a little bit, but he is a very good play caller, especially getting these guys the ball in this sort of quick hitting passing game. So I'm excited to see what Lynn Bowden is going to bring to the table. I think his volume is going to be pretty low, but this is a guy that has a lot of upside as a sort of Christian McCaffrey type of running back as far as the receiving skill set goes. So a lot of upside there, just a lot of question marks, but definitely someone that we're going to want to see what he can do. Then you got Devontae Booker they pick up from Denver. He's just going to bring a little more of that backup power element to Josh Jacobs. So 6th at the running back position. Now let's talk about the receiver ranking. They're going to rank 22nd, which is a quality ranking here. It's, a lot of upside here, bringing in Henry Ruggs, who's really the first name worth talking about, the 12th overall pick out of Alabama. Just lightning speed. I think the Deshaun Jackson comparison for him is very, fair and real and accurate. He doesn't have necessarily that physical element to his game, but the speed and hands and overall route running and ability to get open are exceptional. And he is technically the missing piece to this offense. Now, is Derek Carr going to actually look downfield and keep his eyes downfield long enough? As fast as Henry Ruggs is, he's still going to need to be a little bit patient to hit those 50, 60-yard chunk plays. Is Carr going to be patient enough and willing enough to use Henry Ruggs? I'm a little skeptical about that. We'll see. I said the same thing about Lamar Jackson and Marquise Brown last year and was proved wrong. So we'll see that kind of play out here. I love the upside of that. But in this offense, he's, to me... And I got to be careful here because I love Henry Ruggs. I had no problem with him being the first receiver drafted. I even at times kind of expected that to happen because of the speed and, especially this team seeing what Tyreek Hill does to them twice a year. I totally get it. And he could bring that to the table here. But I also think there's an element of in this offense, there's going to be times where he's a little more of a decoy than anything else, unless Derek Carr, again, really does open things up. But that could ultimately really help this offense. So Henry Ruggs ultimately is going to help this ranking out because after him, it's pretty sloppy. You have really Darren Waller is the number 2, maybe even number 1 target in this offense. He is a beast. He emerged as a complete stunner. I did not believe that at this stage in his career, he would get his life in order and figure it out here. I applaud the man. He took care of his off-field issues, really doubled down on not just being a good receiving tight end, but he blocks too. Like, he straight up was possibly the second best tight end in the NFL last year behind George Kittle, which is saying a lot because George Kittle was remarkable. There's a lot of good young tight ends in the league right now. I didn't mention Mark Andrews or Kelsey, who's not as young. But anyway, Darren Waller is one of those elite mismatch problems. He does enough as a blocker that you have to keep an eye on him in that part of the game. So Darren Waller boosts this up as well. But after that, you've got Tyrell Williams, who's kind of a deep threat that might be kind of weeded out here with Henry Ruggs on here. Like, I don't know. Tyrell Williams with Henry Ruggs, I don't see that being a great 1-2 punch necessarily on the outside. Williams is fine, but he just is kind of a poor man's Henry Ruggs in my opinion. Maybe that's unfair, but I just don't get too excited about Tyrell Williams. He had some good moments last year though, and you could do worse at your number 2 wide receiver. You got Hunter Renfrow in the slot, who to nobody's surprise was a stud slot receiver right away. And then you have Josh Jacobs out of the backfield. Those are kind of the names you've got to keep an eye on. So it's a really nice balance of receivers, kind of like we talked about with teams like Jacksonville, the New York Giants, where it's a good unit. They're going to definitely make plays after the catch and probably help this team more than they're going to hurt this team. But you do kind of lack that true number 1 difference-making wide receiver. And again, that could be Henry Ruggs if Derek Carr can really unlock that deep ball element in a sort of Mahomes, Tyreek Hill kind of way. And then the depth here is pretty deep. Like I said, there's a lot of guys to talk about in this deep dive. You got Nelson Agholor. I'm all for signing a guy like this. A former first-round pick was basically signed for nothing here. Really rough year last year. Injuries, drops, basically was, thrown out of Philadelphia because of the costly drops. That part of his game is probably never going to go away. But if anything happens to Ruggs or Williams or Renfro, he's a versatile fourth piece that can definitely play well in this short to intermediate passing game. They draft Bryan Edwards in the 3rd round. Personally, I'm not a fan of Bryan Edwards. He to me looks like a slower Brashad Perriman as just a true deep threat. Now, he's got some really incredible catches, but just did not show it on a consistent basis. I didn't think he was a 3rd round prospect. I thought there's a lot of big bodied receivers in this class that, yeah, they might bring that jump ball vertical ability, but just the separation, the route running, it's not all there with Bryan Edwards. I get some of the upside. It's a 3rd round pick. It's not the end of the world, but that to me was a little overkill when I don't really see him getting on the field here. You got Zay Jones. He's finally kind of flamed out. I don't know if he's going to make this team. It was a 2nd round pick for Buffalo a few years ago. Then you got Marcel Aitman. He's kind of a guy that Bryan Edwards is going to have to come and take his job because Aitman's sort of been that jump ball target here that doesn't create a lot of separation, but he does have good ball skills. So I see that as a bit of a competition. And you also got to keep an eye on Keelan Doss, kind of a part of this competition for the 6th or 7th receiver spot on the team there. And then we got to continue the conversation back to the tight end room as well. They have a lot of bodies here, even if they don't have that true number 1. So they have Foster Moreau as the number 2 tight end. I'm really excited about Foster Moreau. Before the Darren Waller breakout, I thought Foster Moreau was a guy that could have emerged as a starting caliber true mismatch problem for this team. He's a guy that was underutilized at LSU and showed a ton of flashes as a number 2 tight end here. So I'm a huge fan of the Waller-Moreau combination. You're going to be able to go with a lot of 2 tight end sets and cause some headaches. You got Derek Carrier. You have Jason Witten, who's going to be more of a coach than anything here. I'll still stand that Jason Witten, even in his prime, was incredibly overrated at this point in his career. I don't think he really belongs out there, but that's an unpopular opinion. I get that. But ultimately, man, I could see getting frustrated with this only being ranked 22nd. There's not a huge gap here in this kind of middle cluster of receivers. To me, if you're going to put them in the top 20, though, you're putting a lot of weight in Henry Ruggs and Derek Carr being that big-time impact in year 1, that with Carr's conservative tendencies, I just don't know if we're going to get that. So it's a really good cohesive and deep unit that's going to work really well within this offense in the short to intermediate passing game. So I do like that, but the unit as a whole, to me, is more good, not great. But next we get to talk about this offensive line that is great, a really solid, powerful unit. So at left tackle, you've got Colton Miller, a high pick, a 1st round pick in 2018. Disappointing rookie season, but bounced back last year and definitely shows some promise for the future. Now, he's still got a long ways to go, and I would say at this point in time, he's still probably a bottom 10 or so starting tackle. There's definitely reason to believe that he could take another step in year 3, though, but I do think it's important that he does that for particularly the Henry Ruggs Derek Carr thing that is such a pivotal part of this team's success. I think Colton Miller plays a factor in that as well, buying time for Carr to trust him on the blind side so that he can sit in the pocket a little longer, not take those checkdowns, and hit those deep balls. So I think that all plays together, which is a question mark for this team. I'll be straight up. But then you have Richie Incognito, Rodney Hudson, and Gabe Jackson. Quite possibly the best trio of interior guys. They're definitely up there. Rodney Hudson is, to me, the best center in the NFL. Richie Incognito played like one of the best guards in the NFL last year. And then Gabe Jackson is just a big, solid mauler of a player who has been here for a while, and there's a reason. Like, he is a beast. And then Trent Brown, I didn't think he was going to play as well as he did, kind of leaving New England. I thought they maybe had kind of hid some of his warts as a massive body, but he has rare, quick feet, and he is just almost impossible to especially get through. But with his length and rare foot speed, he actually is tough to get around as well. So he's established himself as one of the better tackles in the NFL. That was an excellent signing. I didn't see him being as good as he was, so I'll give them a lot of credit for that. Ultimately, it's one of the best offensive lines. They rank 8th. When your left tackle is still a question mark, it's going to be tough to be a top 5 unit, but if Colton Miller can elevate his game and be a top 15, top 20 tackle, you are looking at a top 5 offensive line. And then you have some depth here as well. Brandon Park was a 3rd round pick, kind of in development here. John Simpson, a good 4th round pick out of Clemson. You got Eric Kush, Jordan Devy. Those guys have starting experience. Sam Young, a guy that provides some veteran tackle depth. So really good offensive line. No worries really at all, other than maybe Colton Miller if he doesn't develop further, but 8th for the offensive line. So the offense as a whole ranks 15th, which is a really solid ranking, especially when the quarterback comes in at 23. I will mention, I've kind of talked about John Gruden's style here, and that I do like what he's doing here. I think he's done a really good job to recognize his quarterback's skill set, and that is to be that sort of system manager of the game that just kind of distributes the ball and lets really good run after catch guys like a Darren Waller, Josh Jacobs, a good short route runner in Hunter Renfrow get open. Now, we'll see what they kind of do with Henry Ruggs and how that opens things up. But ultimately, I do like John Gruden quite a bit. They're going to rank 10th for offensive coaching and culture. I did a top 10 coaches list, and I had John Gruden on there. So I believe in what they're doing. And I do think this offense is going to be really good. But I do think there's people that's going to say this is a top 10 offense, and I'm just not there yet, especially with Derek Carr running the show. Now, this defense is the heart of my pessimism for this team. And I mentioned not a lot of upside on this roster, and that's where the defense comes in here. I look at these 11 starters, and I don't see a single star on the entire defense, which is a problem. You don't have a single player on this defense that offensive coordinators really have to be aware of. And that's a problem. That's why this team ranks 25th. Defensively as a whole, they rank 29th. And that's just because they are kind of a cohesive unit, and the culture here is good. They play really tough and had some moments surprising me last year, but they also had games where they were getting lit up because they lack the talent. Let's start with the run defense. It's a solid run defense. They rank 20th. Again, they play really well together. They're cohesive. They're well coached. They play tough. And I do think that will, go into next year. You got Malik Collins, Maurice Hurst. These guys are probably better pass rushers than run defenders, even PJ Hall. But they can hold their own against the run. You got Jonathan Hankins, is that more traditional, cheaper nose tackle that's in here. And then really on the edge, they're going to do a good job containing the run with guys like Clelin Ferrell, who we'll talk about his problems as a pass rusher in a little bit, but he's a really good run defender, and we always knew he was going to be. And then you have Max Crosby, Carl Nassib. These guys are bigger body defensive ends. So as far as the front four goes, they're going to play solid gap control run defense. I don't think it's anything special. They're not going to blow anything up. Like we said, there's not a true star in this entire defense, but they are good, smart, strong, disciplined players. The linebackers will kind of do their thing here. I don't see a true difference maker against the run. Corey Littleton, Nick Kwiatkowski, they're fine. I don't think they help or hurt the run defense conversation here. So it's just a good, solid, balanced run defense. I don't necessarily think that's going to be the problem. I think good rushing offenses might be able to get a little more push against this team than others, but overall, a pretty solid run defense ranking 20th. But the pass rush here, a major concern, 27th for pass rush, and this is where I'm probably going to lose a lot of Raiders fans, because Raiders fans won't want to admit it, but they look at 4th overall pick Clelin Ferrell and rookie surprising breakout Max Crosby. I will give him that. They want to look at this as an elite young duo. They don't want to admit that Khalil Mack would be really nice about now on this defense, because he still would be. If you're telling me you wouldn't trade Josh Jacobs and Damon Arnett for Khalil Mack, you're kidding yourself. Stop it. So, Clelin Ferrell, you would hope would be the number one edge rusher here after you spent the 4th overall pick on him last year. Quite frankly, he was much closer to a 2nd round prospect than a top 5 prospect. They totally reached on him, which set really unfair expectations for him. He's not a good pass rusher. He's a really good run defender, and he's put on weight. He's up to 275 pounds. He might reportedly play a lot more like 3 and 4 tech, rushing from the interior on passing downs, which maybe that does spark some things, but he's been primarily an edge player throughout his career, so that's a total question mark. The guy had 26 pressures last year, 5 sacks. He's just not explosive. He's just not a number 1 pass rusher. Quite frankly, at this point in his career, he's not a starting caliber number 2 pass rusher. He's a rotational run defender at the moment. Then you have Max Crosby. who, yes, like I said, a breakout rookie, stunned a lot of people. A lot of people missed on him. Maybe he should have been a second or third round pick. But there's an actual conversation that Raiders fans think, not just that it's even close, but they actually think Max Crosby is better than Nick Bosa because his sack numbers. He had 11 sacks. I mean, I'm not going to get too far into it, but he converted a ridiculous amount of about a quarter of his pressures into sacks. That's just not sustainable. He had 45 pressures, which is an actual sustainable stat from year to year if you want to use a stat as something to project future performance. But here's the problem. A ridiculous number of 23 out of 45 pressures. That's over 50% of his pressures came in 3 games against the Houston Texans, who started Chris Clark, a journeyman veteran at right tackle. Then against Sam Tevi's backup in the Chargers, who had a historically bad offensive line. And then the Cincinnati Bengals, who we just recorded their struggles at tackle in our last deep dive. So you're talking about 3 historically bad offensive lines that he racked up a ton of pressures against. Other than those 3 games, he kind of went off the map. And when this team needed him the most, down the stretch, when they were trying to make the playoffs, he only had 6 pressures in 4 weeks as they're trying to make a playoff run. So Max Crosby, to me, is at best where he ranked for pressures last year, which is a quality number 2 pass rusher in the 40-ish range of edge players. But I even see a lot of reasons why that could regress, because he's not going to be able to go against Trent Scott and those guys we just named all the time. So to me, I don't feel good about saying that this team has a starting caliber edge player, and that's why I think it was necessary that they signed Carl Nassib, who is a higher floor, lower upside starting caliber guy. But again, even him with Crosby, like, these guys are low-end number 2 pass rushers in their best case scenarios. You have Arden Key, an explosive third-round pick at LSU, who I'm not going to project anything at this stage in his career, who he hasn't shown much development really since he got to LSU in like 2015. And then on the interior, I do like Maurice Hurst. He brings a little bit to the table as a starting caliber interior rusher. Got PJ Hall, Malik Collins. They can be a handful, but it's more of an explosive power element than any sort of pass rushing technique. It's just a bad pass rush. They have some bodies that you have to kind of account for, but there's no fear factor at all from the pass rush. And it's not going to help when they have a bad secondary like they do, that we'll talk about in a minute. But yeah, they rank 27th for pass rush. The linebacking unit is the best part of this defense. I like the signings of Corey Littleton, Nick Kwiatkowski. It's going to be a really nice 1-2 punch for their nickel defense. Littleton, more safety than linebacker. Like, he is really quick. He has good coverage instincts. He had an awesome year for the Rams. This was a good signing. Don't get me wrong. He is probably the best player on this defense, which is saying a lot considering he's just kind of a good quality starting coverage linebacker. So I like Corey Littleton. Nick Kwiatkowski, again, a pretty decent signing. I think he's a starting caliber player. Kind of a jack of all trades, master of none type of player. This team did run a lot of base last year, so it's going to be a competition between Nicholas Moreau, Okemi Oligwe, Markel Lee, Kyle Wilbur, and then Tanner Muse, a third-round pick out of Clemson, who I think you would hope can win the weak side linebacker spot. There is a lot of upside there. He played safety at Clemson, so it's hard to expect him to make that full transition in year 1. They're kind of hoping that they strike gold and that he can be kind of like their across the bay counterpart was able to pull off with a guy like Fred Warner for the 49ers. So we'll see what Tanner Muse brings to the table. He's kind of a wild card for the upside of this linebacker group. Definitely a guy to keep an eye on. It's just hard to project a guy converting from safety as a third-round pick, making that impact right away. So I like the linebacker room. They rank 14th. They are going to help kind of control the middle of the field a little bit and take a little bit of pressure off of the secondary that is a major issue, ranking 31st. So let's start with the corner room. Another position group where they have a ton of bodies, but no one that I'm super confident in. You've got Trayvon Mullen is your number 1 outside guy. He's a good kind of young starting caliber corner, and I like that pick in the second round. I think he's a good player. He's a good starting caliber guy. I don't know if he's ever going to be elite. He's not some crazy athlete, but he's a good, smart young player that fits this scheme that likes to run a lot of zone coverage. He's got good length. He can press. I've got no problems with Trayvon Mullen. He's just very young. And it's not like he was dominant as a rookie or anything, but I do expect he'll have a good year too. Then, this is where I get confused, because you draft Damon Arnett in the first round, who I had a third to a fourth round grade on. Like, you want to come out and tell me, like, his technique is amazing, he's got this great character, like, they believe in the human, sure. You draft a 23-year-old slow corner that a year ago Chris Carter was telling this guy, you got to go back to school because you're not an NFL caliber player right now. And it's not like he had some crazy year at Ohio State either. He's a solid player. He's a guy that I almost fully expected to be a third-round pick because he's just not very fast. And if you're going to gamble on a corner in the first round, this is not the type of athlete at his age that you want to gamble on. But of course, the Raiders of all teams take Damon Arnett because he has the high character, because he's a tough guy. Yeah, we saw how that played out with Clelin Ferrell. That's not a good idea. You don't reach on guys because they're tough, especially in 2020 when speed matters more than ever. Then they signed Prince Amukamara. Who is he going to start over Damon Arnett, who you spent the 19th pick on? Most teams, when they draft a corner with the 19th pick, you plan on starting him and showing some confidence in him and letting him kind of learn by trial and error. So you draft a 23-year-old slow corner with the 19th pick, and in reality, he's probably not going to start because Prince Amukamara, while a good signing, and I'm all for signing good veteran corners, it just contradicts it. Like, why would you even think about Damon Arnett here if you're going to go and sign Prince Amukamara? So that makes no sense to me. Like, imagine if this team took, like, Jordan Love instead of Damon Arnett. You could so easily just erase Damon Arnett from this deep dive, and it wouldn't change anything to me because I don't think he's going to start, and if he is, he's starting over better players like Prince Amukamara here. So, I don't know. I think there's a high floor there for Arnett if he does start. Prince Amukamara, though, like I said, a better player. He's got more experience, better route recognition, going to play that zone scheme much better. So that's an interesting conversation with the number 2 corner. That one just kind of didn't make sense to me. The slot corner is more than taken care of, though, because you've got LaMarcus Joyner, who I'm still very critical that this team gave as much money as they did for him to play nickel corner. They paid him like a top free safety and then used him at nickel corner. That's a very cheap, replaceable position. So that's a different conversation, but he is one of the better nickel corners in the league, even though he is just being used as a nickel corner here. And based on their signings, they won't be moving him to safety. So there's that. You've got Amik Robertson, who was a really good 4th round pick, but he's 5'8". This dude balled out at corner. Like, if he became Brent Grimes and kind of became the exception to the rule of short corners playing on the outside, especially in a zone-heavy scheme like this, I wouldn't be that surprised. He's a really good football player. More likely than not, though, he will be confined to the slot, and maybe he is a long-term replacement to LaMarcus Joyner in the slot. And now you also have Nevin Lawson, who is a career starting caliber slot corner. That was a big reason that moving Joyner to nickel corner didn't make sense, because Lawson and Joyner, they're pretty close from a slot corner perspective. You have Isaiah Johnson, a 4th round pick last year, who's a really good athlete. He's not going to come anywhere close to the field because of some of these veteran signings and some of these other picks they've made here. That's really it. That's the corner room. Again, there's a lot of depth here. They're going to have starting caliber players at all 3 spots, almost guaranteed because of all the depth here. But are any of them star players? No, they're not. And then the safety room is very mediocre as well. So this is another pick that I was very critical of and I remain to question, and that is drafting Jonathan Abram and then being stubborn enough to use him as a free safety. It just doesn't make sense. The guy was a box safety that didn't run fast in college. Pretty much everyone thought he was a 2nd round pick as one of these kind of physical, strong safeties around the box, but then they just take him and all of a sudden decide he's a free safety. That doesn't make sense to me. This defense, if they just admitted they were wrong on their process and played LaMarcus Joyner at free safety and Jonathan Abram at strong, I'd be much more excited, but they're not going to do that. That's clearly not their objective here. So that doesn't make sense to me. Abram has a ton to prove. He didn't really play as a rookie. He's a good, physical, smart, aggressive player, but he doesn't have the range to play free safety. And with a lack of pass rush and great athleticism at the corner position really across the board, how's this team going to defend the deep ball? It doesn't make sense to me. And then Demarius Randall was a good signing. He's the most athletic player in this secondary. I'm interested to see how they use him. Is it more of a strong safety? Are they going to do a lot of too high with Abram and Randall? It could work. He's a very, very aggressive player. He knows he's a playmaker, but a lot of times it gets him burnt. So he's a kind of boomer bust on a weekly basis player. But I did like the signing. He brings some of that athleticism and explosiveness to the secondary. And then you have Jeff Heath, Eric Harris. They're kind of, borderline starting caliber safeties with some versatility. They rotated these safeties a lot last year, so I expect these guys are all four going to kind of come in and out and play all over the place. But again, you don't have an impact player in the secondary at any of the 5 starters. So they rank 31st. It's a major concern to me. I think their approach with this secondary completely misses the mark, and I think it's ultimately going to hurt this team more than a lot of Raiders fans want to admit. So there's your roster review. In general, I've got a lot of confidence in this offense to be a really high floor headache of an offense that can kind of beat you in a lot of different ways, even if they are missing that go-to fear factor. But ultimately, I like the play calling. I like the depth. I like how cohesive things are on that side of the ball. That is not what I want people to focus on as far as my sort of overarching pessimism for these playoff expectations here. It surrounds around this defense that I have almost no confidence in these players coming together to being a good defense, even a serviceable defense in 2020. I just think this thing's going to backfire. I look at teams in this division like the Broncos and Chiefs with the receivers those guys have. I think this secondary is going to be running for their life most of this season. But let's take a look at the schedule here and kind of look at what I'm talking about from a win expectation conversation here. And again, if you're listening on the podcast, I'm sorry, this is very difficult to follow, but I do encourage you head over to YouTube at some point to watch this portion of the video. So they're going to start at Carolina. I do give them that loss. It's a winnable game. It could really go either way, but winning on the road in an opener is tough. Then they got the Saints coming to town. They got to go to New England. All these games are winnable, but they're tough, right? You got Buffalo coming to town. That's where I give them their first win. At Kansas City, that's a loss. Tampa Bay coming to town with those receivers. We just talked about trying to cover teams like that. I don't think this team's going to be able to do it. At Cleveland, another pretty explosive passing game. You got to go to the Chargers. That's very much a winnable game. But, dude, I've got them starting 1-7, and that's where we could see Marcus Mariota. It's a tough start to their season. The second half's much more doable. They got Denver coming to town, Kansas City coming to town, at Atlanta, at the Jets. That could be a turning point for them. And then coming home, they've got Indianapolis, the Chargers, Miami, and then at Denver. So the second half, they could make a run, and it almost sets up perfectly for like a Mariota redemption project. If this team starts as bad as I'm projecting here with that tough first half schedule, it could make for an interesting quarterback swap and potentially the end of the Derek Carr era here with the Raiders, which in theory I'm actually kind of predicting is going to happen here. Screw it. Let's just put it on the map. I'm going to say that this is Derek Carr's final season as a Raider. And I also think that the under bet here of 7.5 wins is one of the best bets on the market right now, because this is a team with a lot of expectations. And I think that's where you can find a lot of value in the gambling market. So I'm going under on the Raiders. Call me a hater or whatever. It's just my opinions. Probably the strongest stance I've taken on a team to this point. There will be more to come. But I appreciate you guys watching. Please do hit that like button if you enjoyed this video or enjoying the series. I really appreciate it. Drop a comment down below what you think. Too high, too low for this Raiders team. Who do you think is next? But cheers as always, and we'll see you for the next one. Peace.